John Krasinski's A Quiet Place opens up in theaters this weekend, and spoiler alert, it's quiet good. I'm Roth Cornet.
I'm Dan Murrell. She had the good quip this time.
And that was my really bad pun. But boy, do I like this movie. Dan, we haven't even really talked about it much yet.
We
What did you
haven't
think?
really. I enjoyed it. As you know, I am very much a wimp when it comes to scary movies. But I also, it's almost like a credit for when they're good, because I start off on a curve with me. And if one is crafted as well as this one is, I almost like it in spite of myself. So I did like this movie a lot. There were a few things which we'll get into that I felt were a little unnecessary as far as falling into the tropes of a quote-unquote horror movie. But the atmosphere of this movie, the sound design, it's shot incredibly well. It's acted incredibly well. The set pieces are executed very well. The concept, I think, is really paid off in an interesting way. There's a lot that I really, really liked about this movie that far outdrew the things that I did not like about it. I sort of turn away from scary movies because I'm a wimp.
Yes.
I'm a wimp.
I was doing a full body conch through the large majority of the film. I made sure I was watching it because I didn't really want to miss a frame of it, which I think says a lot. It's no spoiler to say that there are creatures in this film, and the design of the creatures and the use of the creatures I was particularly impressed with. I thought that John Krasinski, who directed the film and stars in it as well with his wife Emily Blunt, not only is it so specifically acted, but it is so well crafted. And from a director's perspective, you've talked a lot about films that trust the audience, and this is one that does so. It's not explaining things away. It's allowing the drama to unfold. It's showing, not telling. We understand how things function in this world through the action. There's a little bit of exposition, very little.
No,
it's mostly told through
it lets you, and it doesn't over-explain, which I love. This does not. I was worried throughout that we were going to get to a third act over-explanation where we go into the history of everything, and we don't.
We don't
which is
need
great
it.
because you don't need it. The movie doesn't need that. Yeah, there are context clues. You see newspaper articles and notes and stuff that they fill you into everything you need to know.
Yeah.
And I also love that there are little hints of the fact that there are other people, but we're not worried about those other people. We just worry about this family.
Exactly. It's an incredibly contained film. It reminds me of some of the I'm sure he's riffing on some of the classic horror that he's riffing on, in the sense that, like The Shining, it's so focused on the story of this one family. Now, this family is a much healthier family.
Yes.
And they're just sort of like good people in a really bad situation. They're 100% absolutely in every way possible rising to the occasion, but they're also human, especially the kids.
Yeah.
And they make mistakes. They make big mistakes.
Well, that's what I like about movies like this that kind of pick up after something has happened. Obviously these creatures are around. If you make a sound, they're going to come and get you. But I like the idea of, like, we've picked up the story not in a sense of like 5 years after where everything is just routine. They're still, they have some things figured out. They're in the process of figuring out some other things, and then there's other stuff that they just don't know. And I love seeing characters make mistakes like that, make choices they regret that have massive consequences.
Yeah, and the sense of tension is one of the things that I was so impressed with. I mean, I think he showed a level of restraint at every point. Like, as you mentioned, the sound design is one of the stars of this film. I mean, it is incredible. And as I was watching it, I was thinking, look, this film may or may not get Academy Awards attention, but if there's one category that it better, it's the sound design, because it is phenomenal and it is so well used. Although I think it should be in contention for other things as well. That's a far off conversation. It's a tight runtime, and I know that sometimes people think that that's an arbitrary thing to care about. I don't really care about runtime. I care about pacing.
Yeah.
I care about the idea that you are using the story that you need to know more.
Yeah.
And it is, even though there are a couple of points that you think, is this the end? And it's not. it's actually using that well.
It does. The pace is great, and yeah, it's not about runtime. I went and revisited There Will Be Blood last week, and that's a movie that runs about 2 hours and 40 minutes. And every time I've seen it, it feels like it's an 80-minute movie. I mean, it just flies by because I feel like that movie uses the tools that it has in its toolkits to tell the story that it needs to tell,
And no more.
and no more,
Yeah.
and no less.
Yeah.
This movie, I think, also, like, they knew they had a good concept, but they don't overuse it, and they also don't. And this is what I hate sometimes: is there's a high concept movie that abandons the concept halfway through or at the end because they feel like, well, enough of that. Let's just get to the generics. Let's have a very kind of bland generic ending, and they don't do that. They continue to do interesting and different things with the concept. Toward the end. So I'm with you. It's paced well. It's the right length. There were a few. My biggest qualm with it is, and again, I think this is a byproduct of me. I am a very jumpy guy. I don't like, if you're gonna scare me, it's not that I hate it. I want it to be worth it. And I felt like there were about a half dozen jump scares in this movie that were really cheap. And the reason that turned me off is just because this movie is so effective at the scares that it has, and the moments when the creatures show up, when you do expect them, when you don't expect them, the things that happen that are very shocking. Those were so effective. And at times when it uses silence, kind of like there's a sequence in Annihilation that is doesn't rely on jump scares but relies on sound design. It's very effective. And I felt this movie was so effectively creepy that the half dozen or so times when it just set you up for a cheap jump scare, like here comes a hand, these kind of.
You think it's a monster, it's really a cat. That doesn't happen.
Yeah, but things like that, to me that felt like, why? You don't need that. And I don't know if Platinum Dune. This is a Platinum Dunes release, and they kind of are known for that more traditional jump scare fare. So I don't know if that was a studio note. I don't know if they just decided to kind of interlace the film, but that was the biggest turnoff for me. Was I just felt like you have so many effective creepy scenes and moments and scares that come naturally that there were some moments that seemed so manufactured that were so superfluous that it took me out of it, because that's just how I watch one of these movies. And if you do that, I so much appreciate it more when you do it naturally and it's not just a cheap gag to make me jump.
I noticed the jump scares, and I sort of went back and forth about how I felt about them as a person that has been a horror fan when I was young. So I agree where at certain points it felt incongruous with this film, because this was a film that was really about the atmosphere. This is a film that's using the genre to deal with a family in grief and in trauma, and it sets up the stakes immediately in a way that is fully going for it. It does not hold anything back, and it lets you know, it puts you as the audience in trauma with them right away.
And has no cheap jump scares.
And it has no
cheap
terrifying. And it's terrifying.
Yeah.
And it's also sort of like, because the very idea of making a sound is so horrific in this world, that even just walking by a glass has you on the edge of your seat, and you're holding your breath right along with the characters. So it did bother, the jump scares, I did notice them.
It just seemed unnecessary.
They
seemed unnecessary when you have but you have so many other things. It's not like a Jason thing where like him jumping out of the shadows is the only thing that you've got. It's so many other things that I just felt like, did you have to do that? Like, it was a hat on a hat.
I agree.
And
I will say I was with a huge horror fan when I saw the film. He enjoyed that aspect of it. Like, I could tell it was part of the thrill ride for him, because even though he wasn't jumping, I was, and he would just laugh, and that's part of the tension release that is part of what makes a good horror movie and a thrill ride. But that's such a different kind of horror movie.
It is.
This is a character-driven horror movie that is really beautiful in the end of it. I mean, to me, it has a close that's very emotionally effective, and then it has a second close that's viscerally satisfying.
Yes.
It has both of those things. I think he is showing so much potential. I haven't seen the Hollers, which is his other film. I think he's shown so much potential as a director. I cannot wait to see what he does next. I can't recommend this movie highly enough. It is a film that manages to be about something, but not ponderously.
Yeah.
You know,
I definitely recommend it if you are a bit touchy with horror movies as
It's
I am.
scary.
Yeah, it's scary, but even just like if the kind of jump scare things, if that causes you as much agita, then I would say proceed with caution. Just because I'm not saying there should be no jump scares, but I think that there are some that are just a bit superfluous. So I would say proceed a little bit with caution, but not enough for me to recommend that you don't go see the movie.
Yeah.
Just know what you're getting into. But yeah, the atmosphere of this thing really sells it far more than
And the
any of
performances.
the kind of
The
tropes.
kids are
Yeah,
great.
the kids are great. I highly recommended from me as well.
Yeah, smartly written too. He finds a way to set this family up for success in a very natural, organic way to who they are as a family, and it really pays off in the end. I really recommend this movie. Go see A Quiet Place. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Did you watch it like this?
I did.
I did too.